Hello and welcome today for our fourth episode. It is, well, they say you never forget your first love. And tonight I am getting to meet the love of my life, so to speak, with the first watch I ever bought in my collection. It was one I really wanted to go for. But first, because he always tells me if I don't say hello to him, my mate Dino, how are you, mate?
You weren't going to do that. You were going to skip me again. Hi, Mike. Thanks for inviting
I've
me
got
into
people
this.
waiting for me more important than you tonight, but good day, mate. How's your
Well,
week been, all right?
yeah, been good. Yeah, been good.
Fantastic. Well,
Thanks.
tonight we're heading all the way over to the UK, and we would like to invite from the Marloe Watch Company, Oliver Goff and Gordon Fraser. Good day, gentlemen. How are you?
Good day. Good day, Michael. How you doing?
I've been in Australia a
That
long
was
time now, and yes,
rubbish.
we do actually say good day, believe it or not.
Good morning. I'll say that.
Excuse me, there's a kangaroo just passing. There we go. It's gone now. Well, gentlemen, as I say, thank you so much for coming on. I've known this company basically since I started watch collecting, and I'm on a lot of Marlowe watch forums. I think you're absolutely fantastic, but we wanted to hear from you. So I will start. Whoever wants to take the question. For those unfamiliar with the brand, how would you pitch the Marlowe Watch Company? You know, what are your core philosophies, and what sets you apart from in the competitive world of micro brands?
I think when we
Anyway,
when we launched Marlowe, it was off the back of me discovering what was really inside the watch that I had on my wrist, which, God, 13 years ago, I think I had this watch, and it was a quartz watch, unbeknownst to me at the time. And I sort of opened it up, and it was, had a horrible plastic movement in it, and you could tell all the components were very cheap, and it cost me sort of $250 when I was visiting one of my brothers in America. And ultimately, Marlowe has started to almost sort of be this stepping stone from sort of let's call it the fashion watch world into the mechanical world. And one of those sort of pillars, one of those cornerstones was, value for money, price. And so we were, and have always tried to make, the best designed watches we possibly can at the most sort of accessible price points. I mean, that's one of the real sort of cornerstones of what we do. There's tons of other bits and pieces. I mean, one thing that I think we do very well is the storytelling behind all of our watches. Gordon, who designs the watches, takes great inspiration from historical events, people, places, and that's really where the watches are sort of born out of. And I think that's a real unique point that we have as for our watches. It's a very, very powerful one, and it also helps to sort of resonate and connect with the audience as well.
I think connection to the people that are behind the brand is one of our kind of defining points as well. People know Oliver and I.
yeah,
They know that I'm the guy behind the things that they're wearing on the wrist, and I speak to people. I'm on these forums that you talk about. I'm on the Facebook groups. And so if anybody has a question, even a technical question, what's the diameter of this crystal? I can answer it. So there's a kind of connection that we have with our customers. I feel like we're just one big, I know it's a bit hokey, but a big family. We've got people who are diehard loyal to Marlowe and have all of our watches.
yeah.
And it's born from that kind of connection to us and our passion for what we do as well.
And looking at your YouTube channels, the videos you put out, they're very much about that connection, and you get an insight, and you've gone into great depth. I remember during COVID, you were recording a lot of material that kept us all connected in many ways, sort of kept us sane in some ways.
Aye.
And that's where that passion for a lot of us, for Marlowe happened, because you put a lot of effort into that, didn't you?
I did, because I was looking for connection.
Yeah.
We were all sitting in our houses, and at that point, we just moved our office from the heart of kind of England up to Scotland. Oliver went off to the Netherlands to do what he needed to do, and so all the stuff came up to me in Scotland in January 2020, and then we locked down. So before we could hire anybody, before we could get anybody in to help, so the COVID was a real a melting pot of emotions, and I just felt like I needed to somehow reach out and connect with people again as well as to, try and get us out there and
Yeah.
show people what we were doing. So,
Well, I suppose we were going to jump into looking into your backgrounds, and in the research, I saw that you founded the company together. You didn't even meet each other for the first 18 months, and I think 2 collections, which I think is fantastic. I was saying to Mick earlier, it shows you the world that we're in these days with technology and everything, that you can do something like that. But maybe if you want to dig into that a bit, and maybe then sort of delve a little bit back into your backgrounds. Like, do you have a formal sort of watch or horology background, or what would be the background that you come from?
I mean,
yeah.
not only did we not meet one another for the first sort of 18 months of running the business, but we didn't know each other before we started this business. Gordon was a draftsman for an engineering firm, and I worked in sort of sales and marketing for a big media company well, I was working in Sweden at the time. And when I first sort of came up with the idea that, I'd open the back of this watch that I mentioned earlier, this quartz watch, and sort of started thinking, well, how do I go about making a mechanical watch? And reaching out to designers, because as Gordon will attend to, I can't draw very well. And so I started reaching out to designers, and I must have reached out to about 50 people just in, forums, groups, things like that, who all sort of took the mick out of me, really. Just I couldn't pay them because it was just a project at the time. It was, I was looking for somebody to design this watch. And finally, after a lot of pushback, I happened upon Gordon, and I sort of said, look, we had a couple of emails. Do you think we can make this work? And we went for it. And I think about a month or two into it, when we realized that actually this was sort of getting some traction, I remember Gordon said to me, look, I think we should have a call, but with our partners on the call, almost to sort of solidify the contract that, well, if our wives were involved, then that's it, we're in. So we sort of had this call, and we carried things on. And so we actually launched our first watch, the Chowell, from when I was living in Sweden, Gordon in Scotland. And during the production, I moved home to the UK, and we took production in there. But it really was a very unconventional journey. Two people not from the watch industry launching a watch project that they weren't even in the same country, let alone hadn't met. It sort of stars all aligned, and we wouldn't have been able to do it a decade before. Probably the tech wasn't quite there, but we really leaned into it. I mean, started on Skype and have moved over to things like Zoom and whatnot now, but. And we see each other a lot more frequently. The office is based down here, just outside of London, near Henley-on-Thames, and Gordon's up on the Isle of Skye. So there is still that distance between us, but it works. We've managed to, make a business which is now 10 years old out of, not working in the same place as one another. It's quite impressive.
That's amazing.
Lots of trust. Trust is the key to everything. I remember right at the start when we were talking about this, and you'd broach it with my wife or my dad and say that, well, I'm doing this thing with this guy. What guy? And then there was this kind of unfurling of, what, is he real? And so that's why we had to have these video calls to just make sure that he exists. But again, it's weird that it came at a point in my life when my wife was 4 months pregnant, and I was focusing on that kind of incoming bundle of joy. When Oliver he emailed me saying, I've been stalking you over the internet, which was a great opening gambit. And I told him initially, no, I'm not interested. And it took a couple of weeks for me to go, actually, there's a wee opportunity there. So there's lots of points where this could have went a completely different direction. But luckily, by the time we'd kind of talked enough and got to know each other, it was like, this could be a good thing. So yeah, we just kind of knuckled down and got to it.
And I think there's a bit of a feather in our cap that we don't come from the watch industry, especially in the early days as well. It really allowed us to design with complete freedom. We're not designing watches that are homages to anything else. We don't know what's out there. I mean, Gordon does have a better grasp on the watch world than I do. I try not to immerse myself in it very much so that we can try to be sort of a standalone entity. But it really helped us in those early days. I think we were producing stuff that sort of didn't really exist at the time, and hopefully still now. But obviously, when we started, there were, and I'll talk just purely about the UK, there were about 10 watch brands in the UK when we kicked off. And, names like Christopher Ward and Braemont, those sorts of brands. We attend an annual show now, which we're just planning for in March next year, called the British Watchmakers Day, and there's about 75 British brands that attend that. So things have changed a lot in the last 10 years, but it was, I think, the position we came from at those early days was really helped us to sort of build the company.
Yeah. Now, obviously, it's legendary that you took the watch apart, and it was a quartz movement, etc. And we were talking to some people at the weekend who have started watch companies. Okay, you changed the battery, but there's a light bulb moment where you actually say, "Well, yes, I'd like to do it," and then you do. And then, when did you decide, say, to stalk Gordon, for instance? What are all the components that have to go into it? Do you have to find, did you sort of say, well, how do I go about this? Or, I mean, tell me, how do you start a watch company?
I mean, there were several key moments, I think, in my journey that, I took the case back off that watch, and it was obvious to anyone that all of the components there were cheap. In fact, I think the first thing happened, I took the case back off, it dropped to the floor because I didn't have the right tools, and I was using a screwdriver, and it fell to the floor, and I picked up, and it felt like plastic. And it was the first time I'd really thought about it as, a material, as it were. And then you look at the movement, and you're sort of, you're surprised by the sort of the disappointing reality of what's actually in your $250 watch. And ultimately, I was working in Sweden. I was over there because my wife was taken as she works for coffee companies, and we were over there basically for her. I'd taken a local job, and I had a lot of time on my hands. She was working long hours, and so I sort of started reaching out to Chinese manufacturers because I assumed you have to go to Chinese manufacturing for this, and pricing these watches up. And meanwhile, I was having Swedish lessons, and it's just a complete coincidence that my Swedish teacher's daughter worked for Daniel Wellington, who you're probably familiar with. Yeah. And she said, would you want to have a sit down with her and a fika, as they would say in Sweden, a coffee? And so I sat down with her, and she was basically telling me, saying, well, she worked in I think they called it the bloggers department or something like that, where they basically sent out watches to influencers, as we would call them now. Back then it was bloggers. This is, 12 years ago. And she said, we spend more on shipping the watches than the watches themselves. If we need to send a watch to a USA, well, that costs us $15. Well, the watch costs less than that. And around about this time, my Chinese suppliers were coming back to me saying, well, if you want to make this watch that you've just taken the case back off of, and I'd taken down all the part numbers, I had all the details, and they said, well, if you want to order, 10,000 of these, it costs $6 a unit. And it was that moment, I think, or that all came to a head around about the same time that I was reaching out to people like, a designer, and when Gordon sort of came back to me, and well, initially he said no, as he just said there. But it was everything sort of happened in about a month or so, where I couldn't quite believe how much margin was in some of these fashion brands. And don't get me wrong, I'm not doing them down. Yeah. And I don't want to mention the name of that brand of that watch I had, but it's phenomenal how much brand value there is in watches. And I don't know, you can look at almost any other industry, cars, whatever it may be. I suppose fashion, maybe, when you're talking about Gucci and whatnot, there are very few industries, I think, that have this phenomenal markup when it's just about a name being printed on a dial, even though components are the same. And really, it was, I didn't want to do what I was doing anymore. And to be honest, once I finally connected to Gordon and I sort of said, well, this is my plan and this is what I think we could do, and this is what a mechanical watch costs, it was so exciting, and it was such a sort of an escape from reality that we felt we had to chase it. And I think we did it in all the right ways. We didn't just go to one manufacturer. And I'd worked with manufacturers in the past, so I knew that you never rely on one. So we actually had the Cherwell, which was our first ever watch that we produced. We had that prototype by 3 different manufacturers just to ensure that we got the right level of quality and product that we were expecting.
My kind of history of watches, I don't come from the watch industry, but I had tried to do this myself in 2011. I was working at an architectural firm. I was a model maker. I made all of these scale models that you would go to clients and say, "Ta-da! This is what it's going to look like."
Yeah.
But they had brought in 3D printing technology, and I headed that up initially. So I had access to this technology that I could do stuff with because I was working around the clock. So at 3 in the morning, feeling miserable, I thought, what can I do with myself? I know what I'll do. I'll design a watch and I'll put it, because Kickstarter wasn't a thing back then. It was some UK offshoot. So I worked for about 6 months and built this project and went on all the forums, look at what I'm doing, and it was exciting and people were engaged. And then I launched it and it absolutely tanked. It was like tumbleweed was going across the screen. And I was just about to get married, and I thought, to hang with this, I've poured my life into this, and it's just not worked. So forget about it. But after a while, I thought I really want to be in this watch industry, so I started to make watch straps. I bought leather. I learned how to dye it. I learned how to make them and stitch and rivet and stamp, hot stamp with the arbor press, and I was doing all this stuff. So I had a kind of foot in the industry already, and that was starting to take off as well. My straps, because I'd engineered the buckle as well. I'd got it machined at a micro machining company, and I was really getting involved in it when Oliver's email came in. And I thought, well, we're about to have our first child, and I've got the strap works. I'm not interested. And then I thought, well, this could be the actual route into what I really want to do, which is design watches. And what's there to lose, Yeah. Oliver was fronting the project. I was not getting paid, but I was putting in the hours for the design work, so I didn't really have anything to lose.
I suppose we'll just pivot slightly on that there, because we haven't really touched on the name of the company. So we know that obviously called Marloe, and it's a tribute to your hometown of Marloe at London there, I think, isn't it? Yeah, trust the Irishman to not know that. But were other names considered? Like, surely you had a list, a big long list of names that you were thinking of, and I suppose alongside that, why did you change it to an E in the name then?
I remember, I don't know why, but I remember those days really, really vividly, of reaching out to Gordon, and in my head I had this name, and it comes from, there's a brand that I think is now defunct called Leonard and Church. So Leonard and Church they launched on Kickstarter. They were very much I studied them quite a lot for our first Kickstarter. They were a really sort of marquee brand in Kickstarter world. I think they were New York based, and they were just cool. I think they were quartz watches, but they were cool, and I loved it. And I don't know why, but I really loved the name Leonard and Church. And I grew up in this area. I currently am calling you from Henley. I grew up in Henley and Marloe area. I mean, I've sort of lived all over, but I'm very, very fond of this area. And for one reason or another, I wanted to call it Marloe and Henley. I just felt like it was very much in line with Leonard and Church, and I thought that it's a very, affluent area here, and it all just sounds very lovely. And I remember we did it with an ampersand, and it just, there was something about it that just sounded lovely. I'm spelling Marlowe with a W. And I sort of said to Gordon, I think probably on a video call, saying, yeah, and I think we should call the brand, Marlowe and Henley. And Gordon went away and designed the first ever dial, the first ever concept, and he spelt it wrong. He spelt it Marloe. And I can't remember. I mean, you're probably going to say it was deliberate now, but even in those really early days, we decided on a font for the brand, which probably goes back to my marketing background. Like, I was like, well, I really want to use this font for the brand. I think it works really nicely. And it's got a very, very complex W where the center of the W sort of overlaps. And I don't think Gordon liked that in the logo, and it doesn't really work in that context. And so he'd replaced the W with an E, and so we were called on that first ever dial Marlowe and Henley. I think it's maybe even spelt Henley wrong. I can't remember.
I called it Harley. It wasn't even Henley. It was Harley. I just made it up.
Harley.
Just make it up.
Yeah. And then it didn't take very long for us to, Gordon sort of said, it just doesn't work very well on a dial. It's quite clunky. It's quite a lot of text there. I think we need to simplify it. very, very quickly turned into Marlowe. There are of course marketing reasons to not spell it Marlowe as well. You're then competing a lot with every business in the town of Marlowe, and just having that sort of independence away from the town, so that our name takes inspiration from that town, but isn't spelt like it. But yeah, it was. I mean, I even now just so clearly remember those days of just not really knowing what to do or what to call it. I suppose the name wasn't maybe at that point in time the biggest concern of either of ours. It was like, well, how are we gonna do this? How the heck do we bring a watch to market, regardless of what the name of the watch or the name of the brand is? And even then, I think that we were probably considering this a one-off Kickstarter project just to maybe make a couple of pound and to fill our spare time. So it wasn't the grandest of decisions.
I've actually many times in the early days always used to spell Marlowe with a W. Even when had your watch, even when I knew it's just habit. But I think one of you has said that you wanted to stand out and remember. It is because it's with an E, so it is different, and then you do remember it. So I think that was a good idea.
No, don't get me wrong. I spell it wrong as well. When I say to my wife, "Well, let's go. Should we take the kids to Marlowe this weekend?" I'll spell it the way we spell it.
Oh, brilliant! It's okay. So you've met, you've got them, you've spelt the name wrong, you've decided on the name, and then taking that company, I guess, from concept to a tangible product. I know you set up a Kickstarter, you raised 6 times the amount you were looking for, which is fantastic. What were the most challenging hurdles then you had bringing, I guess, the Chilwell collection to market?
I would say not knowing anything. We didn't come from the watch industry, so we were relying quite heavily on the expertise of the suppliers, which was a real naive move, because at that time our suppliers, their focus was make it for as little as possible. We were ensuring quality, but they were cutting corners, and we had to keep catching them. We're not happy with this. We're not. So it took ages to get to the point where we had a product that we were both happy with the external quality, but happy with internal quality as well, because that's important for longevity and maintenance and all this other stuff. So it took us ages to really get au fait with how it's done and what you need to say and what you need to request and the kind of technical names of things. I've loved watches all my life, but I didn't know the names of things inside it. So there was a real kind of education in the early days to try and get up to speed with what does that mean? Why are they saying that? And things we needed to do. And we were doing this in the early days in spare time. So we would go to work, come home, and then we were working on Marlowe. So there was a limited time frame before you were absolutely exhausted to do stuff and get stuff and communicate. And the more it went on, we were starting to kind of bleed into the day job. So we were communicating during the day as well. A bit risky, but it was just what needed to be done. But it was just the education thing. How do we do this? Right. The suppliers are saying that we can't have that. Compromise is what was the biggest kind of hurdle for us. Oh, they're saying we can't do that. Well, they must be right, so we can't do that. Now we know differently. No, we want it that way, so you must find a way. But back then it was just, all right, okay, if you can't do it, then you can't do it.
Then there's the delivery of the product that I'm sure Gordon will remember those times as well. Like I said, Michael, we well exceeded our target. I think our target was £30,000, which I can't remember, was with a few hundred watches. And by the time we'd done 100 and whatever it was,
179,194 pounds.
Well, if you want to be precise, that was don't forget that. I mean, it was something like, I remember it was in the region of a couple of thousand watches or something along those lines, and we had also sold watches off the back of the Kickstarter campaign through the website. And so when these watches landed, we had completely underestimated the challenge of shipping that many products out. And so what we actually did is we did it in sort of 2 stages. The watches came into Gordon. Gordon put straps on them and then sent them down to me, and I fulfilled them. But we didn't and have never employed any sort of part-time staff to cover these huge shipping periods. But it was mad. We literally handled every single watch, every single box, all over the world, and had to just figure it out from scratch. And it was, I mean, I remember there was a 2 week period where we'd hired this it was our first office really, this purpose-built sort of set of roller door shutter places, and we had this tiny little upstairs office. And I just remember all the boxes, we had all the packaging arrive on time. And that's another thing, scheduling everything to come in at the right time, getting all your straps, because we were having our straps delivered from Germany and they were coming from somewhere else. And the boxes were coming from, well, we had those boxes made in the UK and getting those, and just, it filled the room. There was nowhere to sit, it was just that we might as well have just got a container or a lockup or whatever. And I remember for 2 weeks, I went to that container, that lockup, from about 6 in the morning to 10 p.m. every single day for 2 solid weeks, just shipping watches. And I remember my mum came in on the penultimate day, I think it was, and I sort of broke down. And it wasn't from sadness; it was from complete sort of the light. You could see the light at the end of the tunnel, but it had practically broken me. And I have no idea how Gordon felt. I mean, I don't think he had any fingernails left putting straps onto watches. But it was at that point, I mean, I think I was ready to call it a day. I felt like, no, this is more than I'd ever bargained for. But I think, it only takes a couple of days to get past that, to revel in it and to be, excited again for what the next product might bring.
Right. So for me, and I mean this, Marloe, it really is the epitome of what I call a British watch brand. Can you explain to me, and I know Gordon gets on forums, and if you ever mention this, he's on there straight away. Your transition, from marking your watches British design to incorporating Swiss made. Was there was a strategic reasoning behind this? And sort of expanding, if I say 2 years ago, and I would have had this conversation with Gordon, what is a British watch?
Am I answering that?
Well, I've been on some forums, mate, and you've gone full tilt on this, because it's an important thing, because you hear British design, British made, British inspired, and there's all these different sort of labels you can put on them. And I know obviously for quality, you're putting Swiss made as well. Explain the difference. Explain why that's important.
Oh boy. We're at a position now, or I'm certainly at a position now, where because I've had 10 years in this industry and I know how it works, the geographic provenance of things matters less than the quality of the thing, right? So people pick up your watch and they go, whoa, feel the weight of that, or God, I love how clean the polishing is, or the quality of material, finish, assembly, accuracy. That's the visceral reaction. Whoa. It's the people that are hell-bent on finding the geographic location of every component that are missing the point. And that extends out to Swiss made as well. So Swiss made for us in the early days was a feather in the cap. We'd done the Cherwell, Derwent, Lomond, and we thought, we need to do a Swiss made watch. Then we will have made it. That'll be us. We'll be real. We'll be a real boy.
I'm a real boy.
And so we went out to Switzerland and we found a supplier, and we went through the process of making this Swiss watch. And it exposed us to the concept of Swissness, the 80% of Swiss components and time and assembly and finishing make up the Swissness of the watch. And so that educated us in what actually makes a Swiss watch Swiss. And it's again an exercise in branding. Swiss made at this stage in the game, it often is just a name stamp. The provenance of components more often than not are not in Switzerland. So that then kind of gave us more information that we could work from and focus ourselves less on it must be Swiss, whatever Swiss is, and it must just be quality, because we can educate people and we can talk about stuff from a quality perspective easier than provenance of component, because a lot of people are not willing to listen to the truth of it. So again, leading into the British made, the British built, British design, we as Brits, as the UK, Great Britain, we're leaders in industry, manufacturing and shipbuilding and loads of things. And we've lost all of that. We don't really do much here anymore. Watches, there was a massive Timex factory in Dundee back in the day, which isn't there anymore. So we the UK and Scotland, obviously, because we built the modern world that you welcome. We've lost a lot of industry here, and so when we were getting into this, the goal, the key, the dream was British made. And a lot of other companies, British companies, have tried to do that and have not succeeded. Folk with a lot more capital, a lot more leverage, a lot more investment than us have tried and failed. And so we've started to gravitate away from British made a wee bit and more taking control of what we can do. So built in-house. We design obviously in Britain, but if we can control everything, including the assembly of the watch, then we can assure quality and we can speak from a position of absolute authority. This is the best we can do. So,
do you?
I don't know. Maybe I've
actually assemble the watches in house now. The majority of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
All of them.
All of them. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. We've got a watchmaker, Alison, and we've got a watch assembler, Jazz. We've got 2 people now in house in our office that are. Alison's a qualified low-step watchmaker. We're doing it. We are doing it now in house. We're taking control of our watches.
Fantastic. Absolutely awesome.
I mean, it was, and this has been a journey. When we with the Cherwell, and I think with the maybe with the Cherwell we had hand wound on the dial, but I think there was a moment where we were so proud that all of the watches were British design that we wanted it to be on the dial. And in fact, I think we went to a few reviewers and sort of asked for their feedback, and they said, if you put British on there, it will get confusing. And that was probably the first sort of opening we had to this world of Swiss made and British made and all this nonsense. And we went ahead and put British design on it. We were proud that it was British design. And then when we launched the Haskell, we felt that Swiss made sort of trumps British design in a way. And I think that going through this little journey of understanding what all these various things stand for was really, really interesting and sort of played completely against who we were or what we were trying to do. And in fact, it wasn't until the English brothers at Braemont produced a watch that did say made in England on it that Roger Smith then wrote an open letter saying that's not made in England. And you can't say that. It's derogatory to the British watchmaking world. If you really want a British made watch, you literally need to go to Roger Smith and get one of his £500,000 watches, because no one at the moment makes the movement in the UK, which is a shame, but that's just how the land lies, unfortunately.
The boys were so thoroughly engaging and forthright that we just couldn't edit out much of the interview. So Marloe will be back for part 2, where they will discuss their upcoming watches, the Marloe unboxing experience, and the time it takes in years until UK expats in Australia start using the term g'day. Until the next time.